Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke. I'm Kalen.
And I'm Marina. And today we have a very special episode for you guys. If you listened to our episode a few weeks ago about the Disclosure Project press conference that came out, you're gonna be in for a treat today because we have two of the attorneys that are on the legal team, Paige Fox and Derek Garcia, joining us today. And we're absolutely so honored for this opportunity.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us. Good to be here.
So, in case you didn't listen to that episode on that a few weeks ago, Derek Garcia was a speaker at the press conference. He is a civil rights attorney from New Mexico, and Paige Fox reached out to us on TikTok to see if we would be interested in having them on the show, and absolutely, this is our first interview guest, and it just feels like such a fitting topic because our first ever episode was actually just titled Aliens. So Paige, Derek, why don't y'all go ahead and give yourselves a little bit of an introduction for our listeners.
Paige, if you'd like to take the lead on that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm Paige. I am in Chicago. I've been an attorney. I graduated in 2015, so since 2015. I really just got involved in the UFO disclosure stuff with Dr. Greer and Derek as of April of this year, when I reached out to Dr. Greer and was asked to, basically I was fed up with everything I had learned since I started down this rabbit hole in October. And I basically just reached out and said, there's got to be something that can be done about this. There's so many legal implications with all of this stuff that's not being discussed openly, that's like clearly stigmatized, and just hit like all of this evidence is in front of us, but nothing's being done about it. Like, what can we do? That we can put a group of attorneys together or something, blah, blah, blah. He eventually reached out to me, and then he connected me with Derek. And from there, we have been working on putting this team together. So, yep.
Sweet.
Derek?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Derek Garcia. I'm an attorney based in New Mexico. I got my start in 2010. I graduated from law school in 2010 as a private plaintiff civil rights attorney, so mainly doing excessive force claims under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, as well as discrimination claims, 14th Amendment, equal protection claims, that sort of thing, as well as some criminal defense and a little bit of RICO side law, although it wasn't my specialty. My following of Dr. Greer and the Disclosure Project goes all the way back to 2001, during the original May 9th, 2001 press conference of the National Press Club. After viewing it in my college dorm room, at Wesleyan University at the time, which was the largest internet broadcast of its kind at the time and reached so many people even beyond the mainstream corporate media, that I decided I wanted to know more. So I was on an internship for both senators from New Mexico, Senator Bingaman, who was the Democratic senator, for the beginning of the summer, and at the tail end of the summer, Senator Domenici went down there on Capitol Hill and talked to a number of people, including my remarks, talked to Senator Daniel Inouye directly on this issue, and I can discuss more as our interview continues here. But I'm happy to join Paige Fox as my co-conspirator in bringing together the Disclosure Project legal team. We now have, I understand, over 200 attorneys, paralegals, law students, legal assistants, criminal investigators, prosecutors of all stripes across the nation and the world, sort of waiting on the next steps for our organizational efforts to bring light to this issue. Our goal, as I've stated previously, is to support the legal constitutional government in disclosing this in a safe and responsible way, in a way that brings these technologies out, open source for public disclosure in time to save the global climate change and global climate environmental crisis that we're currently all faced with. So that's little bit about my background, and great to be here today.
Thank you. So that's really great to hear that now there's 200 plus of you guys, whereas when that press conference came out, it was 90.
Yeah, that's
So I'm
wild.
glad.
Just by the time we made that TikTok, whenever me and Paige first connected, we were at 90, and now over 200. That's fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's moving very fast. I think both Paige and I agree. There's plenty of work to be done for all the assembled talent, and we're excited. We've had our second organizational virtual meeting via Google Meet, so gotten to know a lot of people virtually as well as in person at the June 12th conference. So made a lot of connections there. We have a lot of really heavy hitters, very renowned, acclaimed attorneys in their own right in their specialty areas. And we have attorneys now in almost every relevant jurisdiction in terms of where some of the black site facilities are located, in terms of where some of the hotspots of activity are for the suppressed technology. So we hope to make good use of all that assembled talent. And we were excited to announce Paige and myself just formed Fox and Garcia. It's a limited liability partnership, and that's the overall law firm that we're going to be organizing the associate attorneys and volunteer attorneys under. It's all volunteer at this point. We're trying to get to the bottom of this issue as a public good. So neither one of us have been accepting any fees, attorney's fees, or likewise. We all have busy day jobs, everybody on this volunteer legal team. So everything that we do is usually in the off hours, like right about now, and trying to make advancements on this issue. Yeah, we have a lot to say about timing and sort of strategy and considerations. And I know you have some questions about the RICO statute as well, but that's sort of a little bit of an update. I guess we can confidently say now that July is closing, we have assembled and laid the groundwork, the foundation of our legal team, and we're excited to bring everyone in a confidential way that allows everybody to handle some very, very, very sensitive information that hasn't been publicly disclosed yet in a way that allows everyone to fully participate and help the legal government regain control of this issue for the first time since President Eisenhower, from our historical reading of the background on this issue.
Nice.
Do you have anything to add to that, Paige, or a pretty good synopsis?
I don't think so. I mean, it's been wonderful seeing not only the talent that is behind this. It's kind of, in a way, how I've talked about it is it's really kind of it's some justification behind all of this, like there's just so much stigma behind all of it that having an open conversation about this stuff can be really difficult depending on where you're at. But, when you start getting all of these professionals who are very, who have experience like years and years and years, I can't even begin to guess the number of years we have in experience if we were to combine everybody that's already volunteered on the team, and so seeing some of the names, seeing some of the positions that these people are in, being able to work with some of these people so far, it's been wonderful. And it's just been really cool to be like, there's so much talent behind this, there's so much knowledge, skill, experience that we have behind our team at this point. It's really cool to see. And it's really, it's like I said, it's good justification in that you don't feel so, quote, crazy because you're talking about it. Like a lot of people seem to look at you for talking about it.
I'm very used to that because I've been a believer in all of this since I don't even know, probably 7 years ago when I first started really getting into Dr. Greer's documentaries and all of that. I remember one of them when I think it was the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind that he put out. We watched that, and me, my boyfriend, and our roommate, who was a frat boy at the time, we all went outside and tried to shut our minds off and just kind of think about summoning UFOs. We are into it. We believe it, and we believe all the people coming out with their stories. And it's so frustrating. Maybe 7 years ago, I would have been expected to be perceived as a crazy person for believing in this. But now the evidence is so heavy and it's out there that it makes me feel like everyone else is crazy for not looking at it.
And
What I've noticed with that, I was going to
no,
say,
go ahead.
go ahead. I was just gonna say, what I've noticed with that is it's seeing it now from my perspective, where not very long ago I wasn't into this stuff at all, and I was very focused in things like politics and this stuff like that, and it's not in mainstream media. It's just not. I mean, it's flat out not in mainstream media. It's not in news anywhere. And so I feel like that's why it's so important for getting in touch with people like you and, and having platforms like this to talk about this stuff. It was why I was so excited to see that you were talking about Dr. Greer's conference. Initially on TikTok was like, yes, that's what we need. We need these people who are willing to talk about this stuff, because mainstream media is just garbage. It's
Yes.
so.
That was one big thing whenever we were even coming up with talking about doing the episode like 2 episodes ago, where we were talking about the original press conference when I made that TikTok. I had never even heard about it. Marina came up to me and was like, hey, we have got to do this episode. Like, this is huge. And she explained to me what it was. And I was like, how have I never heard anything about this, like, at all? Like, this is such a giant collaboration going on, and I haven't heard a word about it.
Yep.
Like,
We know
Same
for a
thing.
fact there are a couple of extremely salient reasons why June 12th isn't being carried in the media. It's funny because May 9th of 2001, the initial Disclosure Project 1.0 press conference actually got more mainstream media coverage than June 12th of 2023. You would think that with better information sharing, we should be going in the opposite direction, but that isn't the case on this issue. As I think that Dr. Greer presented in the Lost Century and How to Reclaim It, the new documentary, which just came out by the Disclosure Project and Serious Disclosure, the media is not free to report on this issue. It is absolutely controlled, and there were 2 documents presented in that documentary that establishes that as true as well. I've seen those documents myself. Directly from our intelligence agencies. So there's actually a few different things going on in the media. One, you have lawful intelligence agents that have long existed historically and are allowed to strategically influence foreign policy communications through the national media, through the corporate media, and they have long done so, and they're allowed to do that under law. But the problem is you also have what we've termed the legal shadow government, the ISG, in connection with lawful agents in the USG, the United States government, who also suppress this topic or spin this topic for psychological warfare purposes, or because they're corrupt and they wish to see the technology continue to be suppressed, mainly due to oil and fossil fuels issue and energy. And they tend to support the efforts to suppress this topic. So the problem is nobody knows who's who as of June 12th, especially. We don't know people's motivation for keeping this out of the mainstream media. It is enough to say that there were news crews there on June 12th, several of them, News Nation, and a few of the big networks actually did interviews with myself and Dr. Greer directly. We directly witnessed those, and none of that content was used, to our utter dismay. So I think you also have the emperor has no clothes phenomenon going on, where the United States government knows what we're saying is true, that they lack operational control over specific technology in the private sector, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, in unacknowledged special compartmented access projects, or USAPs, and they don't have operational control over this, and it's a situation where the media does not want to call attention to the fact that our lawful constitutional government lacks operational control, and that this issue is primarily controlled and technology supremacy has been achieved by illegal, unconstitutional actors operating both in the private sector and under color of law by virtue of their government positions. So those 3 factors, and then of course you have the giggle factor too, where average everyday reporter isn't going to task with the owners of their news media corporation insisting on coverage on this issue because they don't want to be looked at as crazy inside their own, news organization. So independent podcasters, independent YouTube content creators are absolutely crucial for getting this out, because the same stakes for those people's careers are on the line, and people are hungry for information on this. So thank you very much for giving us quite a ability to communicate the message on the necessity of disclosure.
Absolutely. So, can you dive in a little bit into what exactly the RICO Act is? Because obviously from the press conference we know it's like we're going after full disclosure of the free energy, the aliens are here, the UFOs, all of that stuff. But what is the RICO Act and how does that come into play with trying to get this disclosure? Because I know our listeners have no idea possibly what the RICO Act even is.
Certainly. And, it's sometimes the law can seem a little distant, but it can be directly applied to this case, and I'm convinced used as a powerful force for good. The purpose of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act of 1970 was basically to strengthen legal tools that private civil attorneys have in their toolbox to be able to essentially enforce the criminal law without having to wait for an assistant United States attorney or a federal prosecutor or even a state criminal prosecutor to prevent criminal activity. It was originally conceived of to prevent, sort of unlawful union busting and, surrounding private corporations and companies that would infiltrate unions and use illegal means of suppressing the right to collectively bargain. So in other words, I can bring, as a civil private attorney, I can bring a civil lawsuit to enforce the criminal law. And the power in RICO lies in its conspiracy provision. It says that we have to allege that there is a criminal enterprise, which certainly applies to this case in the form of the illegal shadow government, as discussed by Daniel Inouye during the Iran-Contra hearings, that there's a criminal enterprise which has direct operational control and is withholding vital technology from the public on this issue. And that they have long since existed. I think Eisenhower, as Dr. Greer has said multiple times, has warned about them. Beware the military-industrial complex. They have lost control of the most vital technologies that is key to the future of our planet and for getting out of this global climate change crisis. So under the RICO Act, we can, as private individuals, anyone that's been damaged in his business or property by a racketeer, which is a criminal influenced private actor, can file a civil suit. And all we have to do is prove the existence of the enterprise itself, the criminal enterprise, and we can hold them accountable for a variety of cognizable claims under the RICO Act and a variety of crimes. And we can get civil damages in the form of monetary damages for people who have been harmed by the illegal secrecy on this issue. So long as we prove that one of four specified relationships between us and the defendants and the enterprise. Either the defendants invested in the proceeds of a pattern of racketeering, and I'll go into what racketeering is a little bit later, but if they somehow invested money or committed a pattern of racketeering activity on behalf of the enterprise, or they acquired or maintained an interest or control in the enterprise through that pattern of racketeering activity, or if they conducted or participated in the affairs of the enterprise through the pattern of racketeering activity, or if they conspired. Anyone that was part of a conspiracy, which means an agreement under the law, not the CIA invented the term conspiracy theory, but rather a criminal conspiracy where two or more people agree to commit criminal acts together. We can hold them accountable for civil damages under the RICO Act. In addition, the evidence that we will develop as part of these multiple RICO actions, if we're successful in what we're aiming to do, can be used later by criminal prosecutors in a variety of jurisdictions. So in other words, if we're taking depositions or under oath court testimony, reported testimony that, based on our questioning, those transcripts, those interviews, those in-court proceedings under oath can also be used later to support criminal prosecutions against anyone who's part of the criminal enterprise and that is acting with knowing, and that's the key. It has to be a knowing criminal mens rea or state of mind. It has to be a knowing criminal complicity in keeping all of this secret. Racketeering includes a number of crimes. And I won't bore your listeners by going in too much detail, but it can include very, very serious crimes such as murder and homicide, which we've known to be tied into this issue. It can include money laundering, which is supreme in this because a lot of our taxpayers have been laundered, and taxpayer dollars have been laundered to support illegal beyond black, blacker than the black budget, technology and development. And so money laundering, intellectual property theft, going all the way back to the time of Nikola Tesla and some of his later inventions surrounding energy. Intellectual property theft is one of the included offenses, as well as any kind of assassination, kidnapping, bank robbery, credit card fraud. And recently, it came out in the testimony of Michael Herrera, human trafficking, as well as drug running, and those sort of crimes are also covered. And to boil it down, RICO allows us to, through civil attorneys, through private civil attorneys. We're not affiliated with any state or prosecutor's jurisdiction, but we can enforce the criminal law on these through the Federal Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act. So that's a long way of saying that in a nutshell, and we hope to use it as a powerful tool for good in the months ahead.
Well, that helps me understand it a lot better, so thank you for that.
Yeah, same. Hello.
Probably TMI though, right?
It's a lot of, we're basically it allows us to collect all of the evidence and basically do the work for the people who aren't doing the work in terms of charging these, getting control of these issues. It allows civil attorneys, civilians to do something.
Right. Precisely. And it forces the issue also. It will keep the pressure up. If this Wednesday's hearing, which is being conducted by the House Oversight and Reform Committee on Oversight and Accountability, Tim Burchett, Congress is finally waking up to the fact that the people that are supposed to be in charge are not in charge on this issue. And I think that having the civil RICO statute in play allows us to keep up the pressure. If we're getting better results through private lawsuits than our own government is getting the people that are supposed to be in charge on the House Oversight, the Committee on Oversight and Accountability Committee, as well as the intelligence committees and the relevant Senate committees, something is wrong. We shouldn't be the ones bringing this information to light. It also allows all the typical excuses of whether or not withholding various technology is somehow a matter of national security. It's going to force a federal judge to actually look at whatever they're trying to withhold, whether it be documents, whether it be technology, whether it be exotic technology, off-world derived technology. If they're withholding this under a claim of national security or that it's too dangerous to release, that kind of information needs to be reviewed, what's called in camera. In other words, a federal judge would need to actually look at that and then make a ruling on whether or not it should be covered by national security. Otherwise, they're no different than the mafia, the people that are holding this, because they're doing so without congressional oversight, and they're doing so without lawful executive branch oversight. So that's the big distinction. They're no better than the mafia. And that's precisely what the RICO Act was designed to get at, those who are escaping the scrutiny of the constitutional actors, which is why we have said we have to be strictly nonpartisan in this approach. Good people on all sides of the aisle who want to see this disclosed once and for all, and we're here to support those legal and peaceful means of achieving that end.
I'm glad that you said that. And that was a big question that I had was, what if this is just like a matter of public safety and that's why they were withholding that? But the fact that you said that they need to have a judge or somebody else overseeing that and determining that is what really sets it apart. And I was confused by that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, well, and there's so much at this point, that they've been using that excuse for 100 years now, that they've had to keep this stuff secret. Well, what part of it? This has grown so much, or the technology that they have is so beyond anything that most people are aware of at this point. Why does that technology need to be hidden? And also on top of that, why are you using stigma and a lack of attention in the news to bring anybody's attention to this? There has to be a legitimized effort by all parties. And I think, at least if nothing else, bringing it to a courtroom for some people will legitimize it, because it's just been so shoved down to so many people. But yeah.
I just hope that these people reviewing everything, like, it is so hard for me to believe now that everyone is a good person in powers of position. I just hope that it all works out and there's not someone at some point to like stop the progress that we just don't know about. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with what Wednesday looks like, because we know what they've been given. They have plenty of information about other whistleblowers, about way more than just David Grush, and so it's going to be curious to see what types of things they talk about and what types of things they pretend like they do or don't know.
Yeah.
Because actually, sure, interestingly, following what you had mentioned about the 2001 disclosure project, so there was a whistleblower in 2001 too, that came out with a very similar story to David Grush, except he was particularly the one who saw this. So he had firsthand witness account information of this stuff. And it happened a couple months prior to Dr. Greer's 2001 disclosure project conference. And it was a very similar, like a weirdly similar story to Grush, except for Grush didn't supposedly see these bodies, but this other one, Deke Richards, in 2001, he had seen the bodies. So again, it's going to be really interesting to see what they claim to know or don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The previous UAP hearing, Dr. Greer likes to call it a dog and pony show because they're trying to maintain an inconsistent position. They're trying to say, well, nothing's been definitively, concluded as being somehow exotic or off-world technology, or all these sightings have plausible basis. For anything that we can't answer, we don't know, but we're also going to withhold this based on national security. It just doesn't make sense. It's an inconsistent position. If there's no there, then why even bother, with holding anything under premise of national security? So they're in a very untenable position in the long run. And I think the rise of the internet has really helped that, because now individual actors, people like the four of us, on this interview, can, get information from each other. Whereas before the, YouTube was really in play before decades ago, your status of being, sane what had to be confirmed in the major media, I think. Whereas that's not now the case. You can get your message out there, what you know to be true, despite Anderson Cooper from CNN and telling you it's true over your TV. You can be part of history. You can be part of this movement based on the fact that we found each other. And we're working toward getting at the truth on this and what we know to be true, and we don't require anyone to tell us from the outside that this is true and it's a real issue. And the same goes true for members of Congress and their staff. Dr. Greer has, after our disclosure project witnesses from June 12th, they've already testified to Congress, to the relevant committees under oath. It was closed door. but he's given them precise facility information at this point, and that's why it's so shocking that they've been able to confirm so much of what we've been saying for decades now, that this is true. And the minute they're able to confirm such, that these black sites are operating in a way without their oversight, is the minute this really takes off as a real issue. So there's no question that we've handed them all the information they need at this point to get this under control.
We shall see. But I noticed that I just have a question about, isn't there like some kind of protection for the whistleblowers to where technically they can't be gone after, but I heard after the press conference, Michael Herrera has noticed black helicopters like circling his property and stuff like that. Like, are they still actively just being threatened on the daily?
From what I understand, yes.
Yes, and I only met Michael Herrera for the first time actually at the press conference on June 12th. He wasn't part of the group of the 450 original witnesses that came out in May of 2001, many of whom I had the pleasure of meeting in person back then, including astronaut Gordon Cooper, who confirmed all this, issues real to me in person. But Michael Herrera, from what I got to know of him, Dr. Greer vets all his witnesses 100%. He insists on the kind of documentation that would be required from, a Marine for someone that had experienced what he experienced. And if he's telling me now, after I've looked into, his background a little bit, if he's telling me now that he's experiencing, these helicopters, and I wasn't clear in the timeline there because I think you're referring to the Sean Ryan interview, the follow-up interview, that he went into a lot more detail. So I wasn't precisely personally clear on exactly when he was receiving these kind of visitations. We do know that ever since, the witnesses have come forward, 450 or so in 2001, upwards of 800 at this stage, is my understanding. Military, government, corporate witnesses, people with lives and careers on the lines, not just everyday citizens. Although that testimony is just as truthful sometimes, but people with the required documentation. None of those people have been directly retaliated against or threatened. But a lot of the people that have been loosely affiliated, especially the energy inventors, the new advanced energy technology inventors that have not worked with Dr. Greer and come out in a public way, have been kind of threatened and suppressed, and in many cases, as documented by the Lost Century, have lost their intellectual property along with their lives to history. So it's very, very serious. The best protection is in getting public, as much public as 3 million or so hits on YouTube might afford you, but that's still public. People can't ignore it, especially with all the TikTok clips and that sort of thing. The numbers are far, far in excess of a simple count on YouTube that may or may not be manipulated anyway. We don't know. We've seen a lot of strange stuff happening on YouTube with a lot of the clips. So that's the best protection, I think, is coming out into the light. The fact that if any of us would be harmed or specifically targeted, we right away, everybody in this community would know about it, even if it's not being reported on the media. So that's our best protection.
Definitely.
Good.
And in terms of, Mike Herrera, I've talked with him quite a bit since at the conference and after, and he's truly an amazing, amazing person. Very honest, very down to earth. None of these guys are doing this for money or for show or anything. Anybody who is actually familiar with this topic realizes how shit on you get when you go forward with anything like this. So it's not, but when I talked with Mike, it was either yesterday or today. He said that there's already a bunch of people trying out to debunk him, and debunk his stories. And it's just like when you talk to these guys, and we've talked to them a bunch, and all of the facts. There's so many details that they're able to account, that's verifiable. That stuff is verifiable. And like Derek said, Dr. Greer doesn't get involved with just anybody, and so of course it's all valid. It's, there's the question is, why are they not wanting to look at it so much?
And Marina's been down this rabbit hole for a lot longer than I have. I actually just got really into this recently. But the thing that really sold it for me was these people with these reputations would not be coming forward and saying this about themselves and putting it all at stake if they didn't seriously believe and care about this. And that's what 100% sold it for me. This many people are not doing this just for money or a second of fame. This is something that they really care about, and they're going to put their lives and reputation on the line to get that message across. And I think people have seen that.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. So why would you want a bunch of, trolls and internet haters on Reddit to be calling you out by name constantly, to have your sanity questioned in a public way? Why would anyone voluntarily sign up for that?
Exactly.
There's no profit in it. That's for sure. If anything, there's a distinction between those who are in it for the money that I can see that really, really require that kind of media attention, that seem to get it if they want it. And that's the difference. Is we know we're dealing with very powerful replacement for socioeconomic forces such as oil and fossil fuels that are in play here. And those who are in it for the money will get the media attention. There's no doubt. And those who aren't necessarily in this for the money, that want to see this technology replace and stop these outrageous temperatures from happening, stop these out of control forest fires, wildfires across the globe, stop the coral from dying, just to stop this environmental crisis in its tracks. It's not too late to stop global climate change. Those who are letting that motivate them don't seem to be given a platform in the major media. And that's the biggest distinction I've seen. The other distinction is the threat narrative. This goes back to the testimony of Dr. Carol Rosen and Werner von Braun. She's featured in the original May 9th of 2001 Disclosure Project press conference. She was Dr. von Braun's the inventor of the Saturn V and the father of modern rocketry, brought over from Nazi Germany in Operation Paperclip. She was his assistant, and she testified to his deathbed confessional that there's been a plan for several decades in the works to fake a false flag hoaxed alien invasion scenario using alien reproduction vehicles, or ARVs, and causing humanity to hate extraterrestrials as the new terrorist threat. And she testified to that in May of 2001, shortly before 9/11. She said, next is going to be terrorists. And lo and behold, I don't know what you think of 9/11, but lo and behold, a few months later, 9/11 occurred. And then the final card would be extraterrestrials that would unite humanity against a global militarization and unite all of humanity in hating extraterrestrials and supporting weaponization and war in space. Would be the final frontier. And that comes directly from, the Saturn V, the inventor of the Saturn V rocket that put the conventional astronauts on the moon. So, it deserves to be listened to. It's been discussed extensively in the Cosmic Hoax also. And these are the days that we're living in right now. The whistleblowers that tend to get the most press, people like David Grush, who are saying that somehow they're a threat to our existence, that they present an existential threat, and they're eating people. I'm not precisely even sure on what he's saying. I guess we're going to find out Wednesday. But I don't know why his testimony is elevated compared to Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin, a fellow member of the bar back in 2001, who testified to the plan on the false flag alien scenario and the fact that Eisenhower lost control of this issue. Why wasn't he interviewed by the media? He certainly outranks Grush in military command structure. So, these are the questions which plague us, but at very exciting times in which to be alive, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I've already seen very recently something about proposing the weapons in space. It is within like the last couple of weeks. I've seen it multiple places, and that's like a congressional like discussion. So that seed is already being planted, whereas people barely know what's going on. That seed is still being planted, which it's very interesting to be on this side of that, because I feel like people are in two different worlds when you're watching, when you know what's going on versus like what you could potentially be seeing in the mainstream media. And this is the first time I've ever experienced it to this degree, like what is happening. But the hearings with that, it just seems to play right in to the same game. They're focusing, like Derek said, on certain narratives, or not focusing in on it at all. And what's the goal? What's the whole goal behind that? What is the plan? Because we've seen for years now that there's a plan.
Right.
It involves some sort of plan.
Right. Yeah. This isn't. They've wargamed UFO disclosure era decades ago, and they decided how they were going to go about it. And if it looked like it was too hard informationally to control, if they couldn't make a reasonable profit any longer because the environment began to collapse, these are the times that we're living in. We have to get off of oils, fossil fuels. It's in their interest, their self-interest also, to move beyond this technology. So we'll begin to see announcements like these new discoveries out of nowhere, like fusion, that isn't a real solution because of the amount of energy to start the reaction. But that wasn't a new revelation either. It goes back to the Pons and Fleischmann cold fusion experiments, 80s, 90s era. So many other suppressed technologies that the media didn't report on then, is not reporting on now, and then out of nowhere, comes out with these revelations about new technology.
Flying cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen the flying car thing?
Yeah.
The bullshit flying car?
No, what?
Well, what is that? Yeah, that's a thing. They're talking about selling these flying cars now. Like, it's a real thing.
That's been a thing since we mastered, gravity control. I think it was 1950.
Oh yeah, but they're bullshit.
Lost century.
They're not even going to work. Like, it's out of control.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Right.
but when the
And it's
guy
just to keep
figured
people
out how to run a
entertained
car
now.
on water,
Yes.
look what happened to him.
That's what got me. That's what got me. That is what made me send an email to Dr. Greer in the first place, was exactly that. I was like,
See, and what's weird is I heard the story about the car that can run on water and about how that was just shut down, but I never knew if it was a real story, and it was kind of planted in my mind oh, that's probably not something real, but that's just kind of the way they want you to feel about it because it doesn't have that justification behind it.
yeah. And that's been one of the stories I've tried to use for friends that close friends of mine who I fully believe would see all of this. A lot of other attorneys too, who I'm if you look at the evidence, it's right there. And I flat out got responses based on Wikipedia searches, that I would then debunk. Wait, this Wikipedia search says it's from 2007. Also, or somebody came back and said, yeah, but he got prosecuted because of the patent or whatever. But it was no, that wasn't the story. There was a prosecution, but it was not related to any of what the actual information behind it was about, but that's a main thing that people used to debunk that was that, oh, he got charged with something. It's just, it's crazy.
Yeah, it turns into a attack on the person's credibility, personal life, in order to discredit whatever scientific work. When in reality, at least in the cold fusion experiments, there's direct testimony to scientific fraud, altering of scientific journals, and experiment results, and that sort of thing that has taken place. Tom Savallone testifies to manipulation of patents through the patent office, etc., and anything dealing with advanced energy technology. National security orders being placed, legal entanglements, and if those don't work, then lethal force is used. I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars in industry here, with oil and fossil fuels and coal. These are vested interests, and they go back all the way to J.P. Morgan and his interactions with Tesla. So we're trying to see this shepherd this through. We're making the case, and I don't think everyone in the government who also says, to go back to the false flag alien invasion scenario, everyone in the government who says they're interested in this issue because of the national security implications, I don't think by virtue of them being concerned on the national security level, that they're bad people, they're part of the evil cabal.
I think they need to say that to kind of get a certain level of respect from their colleagues in the legally constitutionally authorized Congress, because obviously it's a security concern. But when you really peel back the layers of the onion on this issue, the real concern here is the threat to national security caused by UFO secrecy. So we have to keep that in focus. It's the fact that you have this rogue, unelected ISG, illegal shadow government, that is controlling these technologies, and that is the real crime. It's like Greta Thunberg being arrested for civil disobedience and climate change, blocking oil shipments, and she's encouraging us to keep our eye on the real crime. Her crime of trespass is nothing compared to the crime of planeticide right now, killing of entire planet, entire species. So if you want to get hung up about her trespassing or preventing oil shipments, you have your priorities in the wrong place. So the same holds true on this issue. There's crime, and then there's real crime, and the real crime is often what gets ignored because it comes from the extremely wealthy, the extremely well politically connected, and the extremely powerful, and they operate under color of law. They operate under this idea that they have authority because they might have some government position. They might be a liaison with a private sector actor, and they use that to their advantage to keep any sort of lawful congressional scrutiny from coming their way.
One of the biggest things that gets me super fired up is I have a bachelor's degree in biology, and like climate change and all of that, I've been aware of it since I was probably in junior high. And even throughout college, we would have like specialists come talk to us about the imminent danger that the planet is in. And as of recently in the last year, hearing about the suppression of the free energy and all of that, it makes me so angry that like these ISG people, the people in power, they're suppressing what could potentially save our planet and could have decades ago. And I really don't think enough people truly understand the crime that is. Like, I'm just, I get speechless about it, but I just hope that all of this, the outcome is that we can see a world with free energy by the time that I'm on my deathbed in the future. And like, if all of this does go in our favor, what does that look like if we get that information and then slowly the world kind of transforms and can possibly save itself?
I mean, I personally think it looks good in that is possible. No poverty, no climate crisis, none of that is necessary. The concern where I at least really fall is who that's going to hurt and how they're going to react and what that means for the rest of the country / world. Because oil is so ingrained into this whole thing. Mm-hmm. ISG level, regular government level, politics levels, elections, everything is connected to oil, including climate change, based on, should check out Danny Sheehan's 2019 lecture on trajectory of justice. He explains climate change and oil and the plan that basically came into effect that requires climate change to continue in order to melt ice, in order to get access to oil. So it is all way more connected than I had ever even realized that it was with everything. So it's going to take a lot of people standing up to do the right thing, I think, because there's going to be a lot of people in positions of power or in positions of getting some sort of kickback. God only knows what has all been going on. But it's going to have to require that those people stand up for what is, to realize that it's beyond just one person. It's not about just one person. It's not about, just one family, one bank, one company. It is about literally the safety and well-being of this entire planet, like the planet itself, in addition to the billions of people on it. And
Exactly.
We have a limited time, and it just, people, I think that's the only way it's going to do, because, lawyers can only do so much. Podcasters we can all only do so much in our little areas, but we need those people in the areas that we can't cover to stand up and do something about it themselves too. And that's going to take a lot of people pushing back in a lot of different ways. That it's going to be uncomfortable.
Well said. Yeah, well said. I think we have to educate the Congress is what's going on right now. There's so many people who are just coming at this fresh based on this generation. They haven't seen the May 9th, 2001 press conference in which we basically did the same thing as June 12th. They've looked to the media for reinforcement of what we're saying there, and they're not getting that positive feedback. That's why we have to keep energy and the connection with global warming and climate change front and center for these people. People need to understand that this is not just little green men. It's not something to laugh at. This is the future of the planet. This is technology which can solve the global environmental crisis. Millions of people, billions of people are affected by disclosure of this technology. It's not something you can plausibly laugh at anymore. You cannot claim to be concerned about global climate change, global warming, the environmental crisis without getting up to speed on this issue. So I think we all have a part to play in that. And many people in Congress aren't lawyers, and a lot of them aren't career politicians. Some of them are serving their first terms. They've never been plugged into the national security state. They need education on this issue, and if they're not getting it from the media, they're getting it from places like here. And that's what it boils down to. And that's why we got to keep up the pressure on all fronts and continue to push this forward on all fronts. And that's the educational component, making sure that the threat narrative is the only thing they're hearing, because it's certainly being thrown at them very powerfully right now, and making sure that people understand the connection with climate change and energy. These UFOs, they're not running off of Chevron with Techron, or oil. They're running off of something else. You can't go and fill up your UFO at the nearest gas station, at least that I'm aware of,
for $6 a gallon.
If you accept that they exist, which many in the Congress now do, you must also make the next logical conclusion that they're run off of something besides oil and fossil fuels, and that is the key to our future by far.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that requires those people who are, their wealth and their livelihood and their well-being and everything they've ever known is dependent on oil and fossil fuels and all of that. Those people, the companies, they need to be controlled. Things like Congress coming forward is really helpful. But one thing that I've noticed with Congress already, it's always already trying to go partisan on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the legislation that came out last Friday, it's complete bullshit. Like it's not, I haven't read through all of the pages, but a lot of that what I've seen so far, I don't love. And it's just an attempt, why are you throwing things in there about very unrelated topics? You're doing that to specifically get it not voted on, or to not get it passed. And right. So what's the goal here? You're just going to put a little bit out there and then hide everything again. Like if this is going anywhere, everybody has to be on board, and everybody actually has to want it. And everybody should want it, because what it means is a better world, a better life for literally all of us, except for maybe the top 1%. But they still will have plenty of fucking money. Sorry. But they will have plenty of money.
They'll be okay.
It's just, but also just normal people coming up and doing something about it, pushing back and saying, or believing, listening for the evidence, and not just saying, oh, well, they said there's no evidence. Like, no, it's everywhere. Just look. You just got to actually look. It's everywhere. I can promise you.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's their strategy, divide and conquer. They see this 6-month provision in the congressional bill requiring the holders of exotic off-world technology to, turn that over within 6 months. As part and parcel of the National Defense Authorization Act, and they're inserting things and stuff that is specifically geared toward partisan warfare. In other words, stuff that has nothing to do with the objective at hand. And it's making very strange bedfellows, because you have Republicans that are more vociferous on this issue now than the Democrats who you think are on board with climate change. But at the same time, they refuse to even address this issue. So for me, as being a kind of a lifelong member on the left side of the political spectrum, I've had to readjust my thinking about a lot of this, because I'm suddenly realizing that some of the biggest allies on this tend to be from the right side of the spectrum, because they have the military background, for one thing. They understand the idea of compartmented information, which a lot of us lefties don't understand, because maybe we don't have the same kind of military backgrounds, or clearances and intelligence and national security and that sort of thing. So the right wing, paradoxically understands how this could be done, whereas the left wing understands why it's being done: suppression of the technology which will replace oil. So when those forces combine, that is how we get disclosure, I think. And I think we can't be scared of reaching out across the aisle. And we've seen amazing things, beginning to happen with that, with Schumer taking this up on a records level, with the Gillibrand and Rubio. There are many good alliances being made right now. And I think as long as those alliances don't crack over irrelevant partisan squabble, which is what they're going to try to do, I think that's how we get real disclosure.
Yeah. Don't get distracted. We just need to not get distracted, because there's just distractions everywhere. Intentional.
Right.
Mm-hmm. A perfect example of that is the Chinese spy balloon. Man, when that happened, my boyfriend had me thinking that, we had to pack up and head to the mountains because World War III was about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so quickly, scared. It was the day of the Super Bowl, too. I couldn't even watch the Super Bowl. I was so scared about what was going to happen, because the other flying things had already been spotted. And then literally the next day, I took a step back and was like, wait, I can't trust any of this. This Chinese spy balloon means nothing, really. Mm-hmm. It's probably nothing. And it's just things like that are in the actual mainstream media, distracting us from what's really going on. That frustrates me so much. Mm-hmm. And if everyone listening here could do one thing, what would y'all suggest would be that one thing that's tangible for our listeners can do to support this and all of this going in the right direction?
In terms of the legal team, I was going to say we can definitely link you to, if anybody's interested in joining in that aspect of it, we can give you the information, the form to fill out. You can put that in your link notes or something, for anybody who has a legal background. For otherwise, taking on non-legal individuals too, if anybody is just interested in assisting with any non-legal work. But other than that, one of my things is just to make sure to talk about it. It's one of these things that's so not talked about. It's why it's being so easily hidden. I've had so many conversations with so many people who I've been disappointed. But the whole reason I got involved is what I told my family was because they started just looking at me funny constantly. Mm-hmm. I stayed at home with them for a week with my parents and my siblings, just to prove that I hadn't gone off the deep end. I'm still the same person, It's just I know things now that I can never not know, and it needs to be talked about. And that's where I started, just forcing people to talk about it. Even if it was just planting a seed. You're aliens aren't bad, they're nice, or also it's real, or just, pointing them in the directions of things to listen to, because the evidence is there. Anybody who says the evidence is not there has not looked hard enough, or they're being paid off by the CIA. That's where I'm at. That's where the evidence is there. It's in front of your face. So just talking about it, in my opinion, is, and giving it a legitimate conversation, pointing them to facts, pointing them to shows, to podcasts, to interviews with these whistleblowers, to our stuff, just so that they're not just counting on mainstream media to get this through, because they're not, they're just not doing it. And so if they want to be aware of what's happening, they really need to look And so just planting that seed in people's mind, you tell 5 people, those 5 people tell 5 people, like that means all the difference in the world, even just getting the conversation out there.
Yeah, hopefully we can exponentially just grow the number of people that are aware and that are talking about it, and then we will just be a force to be reckoned with. But it's a little bit optimistic, but we can do it, hopefully.
Yeah, I for one, a little bit different approach. I know I try not to waste too much time trying to convince any single individual these days of the reality of this, just because I find that some people don't have the, I don't know what it is, psychological makeup to accept why this wouldn't be true. It's like, telling people like our government isn't operating in the way you understood in high school physics or high school civics. The checks and balances are all thrown off. The private corporations control the technology under the color of law with government actors, literally actors behind their military stripes. Psychologically, it's a lot for people to wrap their minds around and deal with without going nuts in their personal lives. It's easier for them psychologically to tell themselves it's not true than to face the reality that it is. But our side comes with a whole host of exciting possibilities, like getting to go on a ride on an ARV for the first time within our lifetimes. All of this is possible, meeting a species from another entirely different star system. These are all possibilities. Having a brilliant future filled with these technologies, medical technologies, life-saving technologies, so we can give that vision to them also of a brighter future if they're willing to accept even a piece of it. And then I would say it's almost, like it doesn't do any good these days, but it kind of does on this issue. Write your representatives. They're required to listen to you in your district. You can, on most representatives' websites, you can fill in a form-based inquiry. Make sure they're given links to Dr. Greer's materials primarily. Make sure they've seen the June 12th press conference, because the media is not going to let them see it. And they need to know what happened. It's like, we can't even get UFO disclosure if we can't even get people to know that the press conference about US disclosure happened. Think about that one.
Yeah.
It's like that's what's being covered up right now. So just send your representatives links and ask that they watch it and respond to their constituents in every jurisdiction, exactly what they think of those witnesses. Exactly, make sure they understand the connection with energy. Get them to watch the Cosmic Hoax, which is also free and linked through Dr. Greer's YouTube channel, which explains the false flag scenario and the planned fake alien invasion. Going back to, you think about the movies on this issue, I think E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind are the only real, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I understand, is based on very, very similar actual events. But
E.T. also scared me. So.
E.T. Well, those are the only friendly
movie,
extraterrestrials people have been bombarded with since birth.
I know. It's so scary.
Instead, we have movies like Independence Day, and
Signs.
Signs was the one for me.
It's always
Signs
a
came out 2001. Again, look at all the 2001 connections, Derek. That's another one that came out right,
yes.
I think a week before 9/11. Signs came out.
Yes.
So again, the 2001 timeline right now that's going on. There's a lot of weird things.
So keeping people in their fear-based paradigms is their goal, and the more they can do that, even someone, let's say it's a congressperson that hasn't been following this issue, the more they can say to themselves, well, this might be true. I'm kind of convinced that these UFOs are out there, but I'm too afraid of the implications. I'm going to go back to, talking about the, minor differences in the budget. It's so much more psychologically comfortable for them to do. But they need to realize they are a product of a decades-long psychological programming, and why does the movie-based media seem to amplify the fear-based narratives over movies like E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and positive movies. I mean, you can name the positive movies on one hand, I'm sure, compared to the negative movies, the fear-based paradigm movies. So we live in exciting times.
Right.
It's a great point I never thought of.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say one thing to sum up, Derek, your comment about like just pointing to the good things that is coming out, like making people aware of that stuff. One of the things that really hits home to me and what really got me to where I was at a place, I think, to accept this stuff was I was just really fed up with the systems. And I mean, in terms of like, I have family members who it was really upsetting to me that they're still working when they should be retired. Like I knew I was working my ass off at my firm and I was like barely, like everybody is struggling right now, everybody to pay bills with all the inflation. Rent is out of control right now. I have so many friends who are struggling to find a place because they can't afford to buy someplace, and rent has been jacked up insanely right now. So they can't, everybody working 2 jobs, like having credit card debt out their ass, like everybody is so struggling. And what got to me was my whole career was based on trying to fix all of that, trying to make the world, like do public interest law, but you weren't making a dent in any of it. And then I see this and it's like, oh, all of this could be better. Nobody has to live like we're living right now. We don't need this. We don't need to be paying this much for gas. We don't need to be paying this much for shit food. Climate doesn't have to be, the world doesn't have to be completely tanking because of climate crisis. Like it doesn't have to be like this. That's why we need this stuff.
Well said.
Amen.
Well said. Keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on the prize of the better future, and don't let the fear bring you down. Just keep spreading the word.
Yeah.
Well said.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. So basically, I've heard in a lot of different circumstances, people say to write your representatives. And I feel like a lot of people around my age and younger, like, hear that and kind of roll their eyes. Like, they're never going to read that. They're never going to respond. They're never going to, like, pay me any attention. But I feel like I personally am going to try. Like, I'm going to write my representatives and link all the evidence, like, to where, well, I don't know, should I link all of it or just a little bit so they don't get overwhelmed? Like,
maybe a little bit, but also like call them out on social media. Because if they're not responding to you, then tweet the shit out of it so that they're forced to like acknowledge something.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've seen too.
I would say a little bit of both. Encourage them toward the cosmic hosts and the free stuff. The press conference is kind of central because it'll wake them up to this idea that there's like 2 tiers of witnesses, and there's a whole tier of witnesses that's being sidelined versus those that are advancing the threat narrative. And I think by allowing them to see June 12th, you open the door for things like the Cosmic Hoax documentary or the Lost Century. It's a little more positive. And I think, the message on the false flag scenario has reached enough people where it's not going to make any difference really if one more congressperson has it. But it will, when it comes to these technologies, it will, in terms of the Lost Century and the content there. So I would encourage them to see that movie as well as the June 12th press conference and not overwhelm them further. But at the same time, they need to start hearing it. I worked as an intern in 2 senators' office. I know how these things are done. They keep a tally. The staff people keep a tally of who contacts them on each specific issue. So it's not until it reaches that critical mass when the senator actually looks at whatever issue it is. So you're part of many voices, and you just have to keep the positive nature of what we're doing in mind and keep the message coming. It doesn't matter if you have to send them an email every month until they respond on why they're not declassifying this technology. You can say it that way too, because that leads them to believe, well, I'm not the one holding this classified. Who is? Even by asking that kind of simple question, if you're part of a committee, can change huge things. So just keep on them, keep on trucking, and once your voice reaches part of a critical mass, they will respond to you personally. is how it boils down. If they think you're just out on a limb, and what's the disclosure project anyway? Even tell them, go back to May 9th of 2001. You can get the YouTube video of that too. Here's what you've been missing because the the media has not allowed you access to this information. They're not just keeping it from the public, they're keeping it from the legal constitutional government as well. And they know that's very effective because people that, Congress people are on a 2-year election cycle, senators are on a 6-year election cycle. They know how powerful it is when a senator or a congressperson goes out on a limb. But when you have all these voices, like the majority and minority leaders coming together, that's when stuff begins to happen. That's when the train gets moving in a certain direction that cannot be stopped. So we got to keep up the pressure.
Well said. So if I can get everyone that's listening right now to write a representative just at least once a month until, I don't know, something good happens. But if it's something we can do, we have to.
There's plenty like sample language out there too. I think I tweeted some. There's been like sample letters. That's a lot of times the easiest. You can just copy paste it into an email. I tweeted some. Just be careful to make sure you have a good one. But yeah, there's definitely, it's not like you have to write anything. No one expects you to write out a 3-page or 3-paragraph email to your senator.
Yeah. We will link all of the resources for sure.
The important unique voice you can have also is to make sure you push the global climate change and energy release of energy technology connection, because many people who are writing their representatives right now fail to mention that, and there are a lot of representatives that just don't understand the connection or haven't thought about it. They still can't get over the idea that UFOs are real. But if we're going to make sure that that voice is heard, this is the reason we're doing this in the end, is for our own benefit as a species, and to determine our destiny on this planet and not some, oil tycoons. They need to understand the connection between UFO disclosure and energy, and not everybody who's writing will make that connection. So you can have a really, really, really unique voice if you include that dynamic.
Yes, absolutely. That's key. I feel like that's key.
Mm-hmm.
It's also free energy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else that y'all would like to bring up at all?
I mean, if anyone's interested in reaching out or joining the legal efforts, we, like Derek said, we've got the LLP put together now. We've got the agreements, one form of them complete, and I'm going to finish up the rest of them this week. Anyone's interested, we'd love to have you. Anyone on their, it's legal, but it's also things like podcasting, any platform. It's just really about getting the truth out there and getting out awareness, and just like anything else, stopping the stigma with all of this. So that's just, thanks for having us, and thanks for spreading the right message.
Yeah. We are going to keep on doing it forever.
Thank you for having us. Just to echo, you can help us out even with, if you're willing to operate as a civilian investigator on some of these issues. It's going to be a little bit of time. We're trying to move as fast as possible. We all have busy day jobs as attorneys with demanding clients on non-UFO related issues, many of us. So we're trying to work as efficiently and diligently as possible to be sure we're not going to waste all this talent that has now been assembled. But, even if you're not a lawyer and you want to investigate for lawyers and create work product memos for lawyers about what you've learned by talking to people in government or likewise, look at the facilities map. There's a facility near you, a black site facility in almost every jurisdiction that we can use some help with. You can have a tremendous influence. Get in touch, with the legal team, fill out the form, indicate that you're an investigator or an influencer, a podcaster, or whatever it is capacity. It's good to have. It's good to have as many people on the legal team that we can pull to. We need an interview with X person, in this state at the last minute. Who do we call on? you can generate evidence for the lawyers that way, testimony and that sort of thing. So, there's a lot of good opportunities. And right now, we just finished our initial groundwork. We've laid the foundation. It's about doing the heavy lifting, the drafting work in the months ahead, and deciding what needs to get filed where, and what the highest priority is, and keeping in mind that a lot of that timeline is dependent on what's going to happen in Congress on the 26th and the follow-up witnesses, because those first 3 witnesses are just the tip of the iceberg. And we already know even higher level witnesses than the Disclosure Project presented on June 12th with more direct information are waiting for the proper authorities and for the proper time. So there's a lot to be excited about. It's great to be plugged in. And I think, our piece of it as civilian attorneys is to keep the pressure up, to keep the pressure going. And so we're going to be strategically timing the filing of lawsuits surrounding what the legal government is doing in a lot of ways, I think. So ongoing conversations is the takeaway.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paige and Derek. We appreciate y'all giving us your time and coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. Until next
And
time.
to all of our listeners out there, we're going to link in the show notes how you can get involved, all of the information that you need, because like we said, this is up to each and every one of us to talk about. And if we want this to move forward, it is all our responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
And everyone so far who's joined us has been incredible. I can't stress that enough.
yeah, so let's just grow that incredible team, you guys.
All right, y'all. And we will see you in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.